When you picture a massive tech rollout, like a new Treasury management system or a global payments hub, you probably imagine pristine code and a highly engineered timeline.
Right, something very clinical and organized.
Exactly. But the reality is usually more like a chaotic college group project.
Oh, yeah, except everyone already has a stressful full-time day job.
Right. So today on the Deep Dive, we are exploring a 31-page practitioner's playbook by Rhonda Nini Publishing called Leading Demotivated and Uncollaborative Teams.
Which is just a fascinating look at why complex technical overhauls actually fail.
And, how you can actually motivate an overcommitted team. Okay, let's unpack this because the playbook makes a massive claim right out of the gate.
It really does. I mean, it claims that system failures almost never stem from bad code. They stem from quiet demotivation.
Which completely flips the script. We treat these rollouts like tech problems, right?
Yeah, but they're entirely human behavior problems, and it's not loud protests either.
It's the IT engineer marking tickets done without actually confirming the outcome.
Exactly. Or the accountant who nods in the planning meeting, but then secretly keeps an old spreadsheet alive on their desktop.
Just in case.
Just in case, yeah. Which means this isn't a technical glitch at all. It's a collaboration failure wearing a project management costume.
But let me push back on that a bit. If the software itself functions perfectly, why does this quiet behavior actually sink the program? Like, why does it matter if the accountant has a backup spreadsheet?
Well, what's fascinating here is that motivation and collaboration are lead indicators. So by the time a project milestone officially slips on your plan,
You're already way behind.
you are weeks behind the actual problem, yeah. The silence was the failure happening in real time. If they don't trust the system, they won't use it, and the data architecture just breaks down.
Which brings up a massive structural hurdle. If you're listening to this and leading one of these rollouts, you have no formal authority over these specialists.
None. They don't report to you.
Right, so you can't just order them to care. You have to act more like a diplomat than a dictator.
And the playbook calls this the coaching stance. The core mechanism is earning the right to lead by spending your first 2 weeks just listening.
Just listening to them.
Yeah. It's all about lowering the cost of doing the right thing rather than increasing the cost of doing the wrong thing.
Lowering the cost meaning removing friction. So if the right thing is testing the new system, you don't just demand it.
Precisely. You actively clear their schedule of other meetings, so testing is the easiest part of their day. You ask instead of telling.
Oh, I see.
So instead of saying, you need to finish testing on time, you ask what would need to be true for testing to finish on time. It shifts the dynamic entirely.
From defense to problem solving. But it's easy to say, ask questions. What happens when you hit a brick wall?
Ah, you mean that one veteran employee who crosses their arms and refuses to budge?
Exactly. A diplomat would get eaten alive there.
Here's where it gets really interesting. How does a leader handle the loudest resistor in the room?
You hand that resistor the redesign. Wait, really? Hand the project to the biggest complainer. Doesn't that just reward bad behavior and hijack your timeline?
I know, it sounds risky. But resistance is just information. The blocker who fights the hardest is often your most knowledgeable expert.
Because they actually see a genuine flaw.
Yes. If you give them the autonomy to fix it, that verbal resistance gets redirected into actual problem solving. Your loudest critic frequently becomes your best future advocate.
Wow, it's like verbal judo.
Yeah.
You're taking the momentum of their resistance and using it to fix the system.
That's exactly what it is.
But asking questions and handing over redesigns takes a lot of time. How do you actually pull off this coaching stance when you are staring down a rigid go-live deadline and everyone is stressed?
Well, this raises an important point about how we respect people's capacity during crunch time. Take user acceptance testing, or UAT.
Right, when the actual staff has to verify the software works.
Right. There is a single golden rule here. Never schedule demanding project work during month-end closes or big payment runs.
Because if a tester is forced to choose between a project simulation and their actual real-world deadline,
they will choose the real deadline every single time.
And they'll resent the project for making them choose.
And they'd be right to. Protect their calendar and you protect the work. Then, when you finally hit go live, fatigue becomes the real enemy.
So what does the coach do then?
At that point, the coach acts as an emotional thermostat. Enforcing a rest break at 2 a.m. for an exhausted team isn't a delay. It is a vital leadership act. Exhausted people make mistakes that cost way more than the sleep they skipped.
So what does this all mean for you if you are managing a team right now?
If we connect it to the bigger picture, it's that you cannot order trust into existence.
Yeah.
You can only protect your team's time and make their contributions visible. If you do that consistently, the motivation you need emerges naturally.
Treating a people problem like a tech problem is a recipe for failure. You can't just code your way out of a broken college group project.
The human element is always the underlying infrastructure. Always.
It really is. So I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today. If quiet resistance is actually valuable information, what is the silence in your own team trying to tell you today that you've been mistakenly treating as agreement?